Family disputes can make us feel isolated and vulnerable. Maybe you're going through a divorce or a legal dispute about your kids. Perhaps you've spent hours on Google or have even posted anonymously on Facebook to see what others have to say. But are you getting the actual information and support that you're looking for? Our podcast, Legal Lounge, aims to dispel misinformation and downright bad legal information to empower anyone with questions about their family, their children, their finances, their marriage, and the law. As a team focused exclusively on family law matters, we aim to help listeners not only with the information they need, but also with the hope that their situation has a solution. Short disclaimer, please note this podcast is for educational purposes only, and the information should not be relied upon as legal advice or for legal purposes. Welcome back to the Legal Lounge. I'm excited to have a guest here today that is going to talk to us about being a divorce coach. Hey, James, how are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Theresa.
Of course, my pleasure. So what is a divorce coach?
It's a great question, and a lot of people ask that.
I know, because it's not your football coach, obviously.
Right.
Not necessarily a life or business coach. And I could see that someone may need a coach going through divorce. So tell us a little bit more about your role in the divorce process.
For sure. And I like to describe divorce coaching. It's got the same framework as all types of coaching, whether it's career coaching, relationship coaching, life coaching. Essentially, there's where you are. There's where you want to get to in the future, whether that's a goal or some different state. There's going to be some obstacles and challenges between where you are today and where you're wanting to get to. And then coaching is really how do you move through, around, above, below those obstacles to get to where you want to get to.
Yeah.
And so that can make a lot of sense in the context of divorce, where if you want to have a certain type of outcome at the end of this process, it really behooves you at the start of the process to think about that, understand what's going to get in the way and what sort of support you need, and then to put that into place, week by week, day by day, the tactical decisions and the other people really that you need to work with to create those outcomes that you most want.
Well, and it's interesting you say that because I have a feeling that divorce coach can sometimes be a misnomer because you may get involved with a client that may initially want to get divorced, but may also change their mind.
Absolutely.
And so really you're actually helping them navigate through other issues so that their end goal that they've defined now as not getting divorced in a different way.
That's right. And that's something that I do specifically. And divorce coaches do have different focus within the process. Some, like me, are very interested on the early stages, really connecting with individuals at that state of consideration or even ambiguity. Am I going to stay in this relationship or not? Right? Because there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of emotionality that comes up around that decision, and sorting through that and feeling clear and confident about a decision is a really big challenge for many people.
Yeah.
Other divorce coaches get really involved in the middle of the process, collecting documents, preparing to go to court. And then other divorce coaches really focus on that tail end of how do I now move into this new chapter of my life? How do I start dating again? How do I co-parent with this person if there's been a history of conflict? And so divorce coaches can have a very different focus, but they all kind of fall back on that same framework of what are we trying to accomplish here? And how do we very tactically create the outcomes that it is that you're looking for?
And what would you say is your target or ideal client when you are trying to find individuals to work with?
Yeah, I love working with people who are at that point of ambiguity, right? Divorce has come up as an idea in their mind. Part of them wants it. Part of them's not so sure that they want it. And I've started working with a couple of men just recently who were at the brink of separation. Place picked out, furniture identified, date to move out, planning to tell the kids. And in talking with these men, they didn't want to stay in their current situation. There was so much tension in coming home and being in that relationship. They just knew that that was unsustainable for their mental health and their physical health. But, and both of them were fathers, didn't necessarily want to leave. They weren't emotionally ready to walk away, but they didn't know what else to do. And so I love getting involved at that point and helping people to get clear on what they want. And oftentimes that involves bringing in other professionals, whether it's a therapist or an attorney or a mediator, to provide some information around the concerns and fears that they have. Because when people are spinning, they don't know what their options are. They don't know what any path forward looks like. And the stress just builds and builds and builds. And so getting involved at that point can provide a lot of value to an individual to just slow it down, ask some clarifying questions, and then get to the root of what is it that you most want right now? Like, what do you need this week? What do you need the following week? Is it information? Is it education? Is it a break? Is it self-care? Is it distance? Oftentimes people don't know. And I love getting involved at that stage.
That is interesting because I'm sure people come to you with a lot of confusion, almost like a really complicated, and don't make fun of me here, but like a really complicated rubber band ball,
Yeah.
and you just don't know which one to take off next
For sure.
and which step to take. That can actually help someone progress forward.
Yeah. And you're speaking to what I see as one of the biggest challenges for people moving through divorce that tends to create the outcomes that they don't want, which is that they're going through this really challenging process in a state of confusion, feeling very reactive, and oftentimes feeling manipulated either by their spouse or by the system or by their spouse's attorney. There's typically some way that they're feeling disadvantaged in this process. And all of that uncertainty and all of that fear and all of that anger really clouds their ability to think about what they even want and need. Their whole body and system is really like, how can I get back to a place where I'm not stressed out?
Yeah.
And that's their focus rather than what does my life kind of need moving forward.
And that's a good delineation, right? Because when you're in almost like a crisis mode where I'm like just trying to find safety, and sometimes that comes out in trying to assert control where maybe you shouldn't be asserting control, or you start bad coping mechanisms.
Right.
I mean, I had a client one time who, outsider looking in, he drank a lot of alcohol and things looked suspicious, but internal, he had been seeing a therapist for years and he never had a substance abuse issue, but rather he was just dealing with this particular part of the custody litigation process by drinking a little bit more. And I'm not saying it was healthy or really unhealthy necessarily, but from my perspective, I was like, oh, he must be in an emergency state and not actually taking care of what he needs to actually take care of.
Yep.
Do you find that a lot of individuals are trying to throw Band-Aids on certain feelings in situations versus targeting the issue directly when they're going through these initial stages of divorce?
I mean, it's hard to do that.
Yeah.
You're asking people to like get closer to the thing that's already been so uncomfortable for so long, and to do it at a point where their resiliency and their reserves are probably at a minimum, which is why they're kind of at this crisis point in the first place. So where I like to start with people when they're kind of that tangled rubber band ball is to figure out like, what are the concerns that you have? What are the questions that you have? And in many cases, what are the threats that your spouse has made, whether it's around alimony or around the children or around going to court? And then how can we turn those into questions that can actually be answered? So sometimes a lot of the fear is around the finances, around alimony and how long and how much, and will I be able to survive afterwards? Sometimes it's, I just don't even know how I'm going to afford my bills. Other times it's legal questions about the kids and custody. So helping them to turn these fears and concerns into questions and then pair them up with another professional, whether it's a financial professional or a legal professional, to get some consultation and some advice oftentimes allows them to start to move forward because the emotionality starts to come down. And so that's where I think the partnership aspect of divorce coaching is so important. It's not that like I'm getting in and trying to do all of this for the client. I'm helping them to clarify what they need and then connect them to the resources that they need to move forward. That can help to bring down the emotions. It can also help them to show up more assertively in the process, especially if a spouse makes a lot of threats and doesn't really understand like the practicality of the threats that they're making. Talking to an attorney to understand what your rights really are or what precedent oftentimes looks like sometimes helps clients to push back on their partners and say, look, I know you're saying this, but that's not really how this is going to play out. And creating that safe space can also decrease stress. Because some people are so triggered by every interaction and every text and every email and every pickup and every drop off. That's keeping them in a state of being flooded where they can't really engage in the divorce process either. So the emotions are just like, they run rampant for a lot of people.
Oh, they do. And I remember reading a study at one point where the emotions felt by someone going through the separation and divorce process, especially when children are involved, is similar on an emotional scale to someone who has just lost a loved one. So grief through the loss of someone through death,
right,
versus the loss of someone through marriage are very similar. And I don't want to say that they're the same, but when you're in a heightened emotional state to that extent, it can't be logical to expect someone to think logically.
right.
And so sometimes, I've seen it, and this is where I feel like my team specifically tries to excel at, is that we cannot always expect our clients to hear us,
right,
to be able to make decisions when we need them to as attorneys.
Yep.
Now, unfortunately, sometimes there's deadlines or other factors imposing obligations for a response that are outside of our control or our client's control. So we'll try to get around that issue. But if someone is not emotionally ready, then it's very hard to expect someone to be able to negotiate well, to see what is in their own best interests, let alone the interests of other family members such as children.
right.
There's no conversation more romantic than discussing a prenup with your partner, right? Okay, maybe the song for your first dance does a bit more in the romance department. Speaking of emotions, though, the prenup is a very legal document that everyone has a very emotional reaction to. Many people avoid the prenup conversation because they feel it is an indication that the marriage will fail. But here's the truth. Half of all marriages already fail, regardless of whether the spouses had the prenup conversation or not. If you or someone you care about is getting married, would knowing what marriage involves legally be important? What about having the difficult conversations surrounding finances, career aspirations, and pursuing parenthood prior to the wedding date? If you are looking to build a solid foundation for your marriage, or you want the same for someone you care about, we are here to help you learn more about prenups from a position of knowledge, not emotion. To learn more about family law from a legal professional, book a consultation with a member of the Modern Legal team by visiting our website, emailing us, or calling us at 704-286-6302. Check out the information about Modern Legal services at modernlegalnc.com.
And oftentimes people think that I just need some more time.
Yeah.
Time doesn't always help.
And time may be another Band-Aid that they're just smacking on there, not actually fixing the issue.
Exactly. And even as a divorce coach, like I always start my sessions with an emotional check-in because there's almost always something that's grating on people, that's agitating people, another fear that's keeping them up at night. And to even try to drop into a tactical coaching session while someone's carrying all of this can be counterproductive. And so it's always a check-in. What's going on for you? What are you feeling? What are you holding on to? And we have to kind of move through this emotional curve to de-escalate and come back to a moment of feeling centered and grounded, because it's in that position where people are going to make the best long-term, most strategic decisions for their future, and to be able to think about other people.
Yeah.
And so I've kind of had to accept that sometimes even 30 to 40 minutes of a coaching session might just be coming down to this place of feeling centered. And then the last 20 minutes, we can really get to the business of what comes next. But that, I think, can be really helpful for how people interact with their legal and their financial professionals along the way, because now they've done some work on their own. They've gotten some clarity. They can kind of come back with better questions, give better answers, make better decisions.
Yeah. I think that's huge. And I actually don't want to discount. I think that is helpful, at least most definitely from a legal perspective, because unfortunately, and if any of my clients are listening to this episode, they'll be like, oh, Theresa has definitely said this. But they will share with me details that are indicative of their emotions more so than anything else. And depending on how comfortable I get with my client, I joke about it. But there'll be times where I say to my client, I don't care.
Right.
I know you care. And I hear you when you're saying this. And I definitely think you should talk about this specific issue that you are battling with internally with a divorce coach or a mental health therapist or a good friend. But you telling me does not help our legal case and our legal strategy. And I say that with a heavy heart and with as much empathy as I can give, but I don't care.
Yeah.
And I care about the things that protect you. I care about the things that legally will solidify your future and your next step, whatever that may be. Maybe it's saving the marriage. Maybe it's staying in the relationship. Maybe it's just dealing with a custody situation or a financial situation. Either way, though, when we're thinking from a place from emotion, we're not thinking clearly. And it's very hard as an attorney to impart information and receive good information from a client when emotions are clouding the communication lines.
Absolutely. And I think that speaks to kind of what I call a team-based approach to divorce. I actually just wrote an article about this for the IDFA, which is that these human aspects that people are going through are important. But to take everything that you need and to put it onto one professional like an attorney oftentimes doesn't work that well. And it can be really complex and complicated to ask a person who's already feeling overwhelmed and to suggest that they might benefit from working with several different professionals rather than one. Like having one person to go to can feel simple. Doesn't always mean that it's really effective. And so if I'm going to work with multiple professionals, that starts to feel complicated. How do I select them? How do I work with them effectively? But that's also where a divorce coach can help. And I like to think of us as a little bit of air traffic control, is as people have new needs that are coming up in the process, how do we just connect you to the right person at the right time, help you to get connected to the right person so that you're not starting from scratch on Google. And that can really help that person to get the support that they need outside of your office so that when they do show up, they are focused on the legal issues at hand and the legal strategy and can be, most effective as a partner to you in proceeding their case.
Yeah. And actually, that was going to be one of our questions today that we can tackle is the cost of it all. And I have heard the same objection where it's, if I'm working with multiple different professionals and they're all charging their hourly rate, this is going to be so much more expensive.
Right.
And it's interesting because I always have to, if I'm able to have a team on a case, I always have to really work through the numbers with my client and I'll show them. I'm like, look, this is my hourly rate. And if you come to me with these 10 issues and it takes me 10 hours to address them,
right,
and I'm not even going to address the mental health components correctly because I'm not a mental health professional and I'm not a divorce coach. I work on my empathy skills, James. I continue to work on them. I'm still not the best at that.
I'm sure they continue to get better and better.
Thank you, James. You're so kind. But if I spend 10 hours on all these issues and I try my best but really don't resolve all 10 issues, I'm going to charge you for those 10 hours. Whereas if you only spend 2 hours with me, but 8 hours with James, trust me, it's going to be cheaper. And our time together in those 2 hours is going to be so much more effective. And we can hone in on the actual legal issues and legal thoughts and discussions and decisions that we actually need to make.
Yep. I mean, you see it in the math too. And it's counterintuitive to think that working with multiple people is somehow going to be more affordable than working with one person. But I like to remind people that the attorney is oftentimes the most expensive individual on their team, right? And so if there is something that they're taking to their attorney that they could do with someone else, it's an opportunity for cost savings.
Agreed. And go one step further. I love when someone else is helping my client with their emotions. Because again, I do try, but attorneys are just not trained in it.
Yeah.
We're not trained in numbers either, by the way. I'm just going to throw that out there for all the CDFAs out there listening.
Well, and there's a whole nother body of work too
that
you can get access to through different professionals. Like, I really like to help people who desire an amicable divorce set in place the things that will actually lead to that outcome. Because many people, they don't want their divorce to be, really difficult and acrimonious. But they may do some things early on because they don't have the support or it feels really difficult to do the things that would kind of create that sort of an outcome. So a lot of people are starting a divorce process and it comes as a huge surprise to their spouse. There was an opportunity to have some other conversations with that spouse to let them know very clearly that this is the direction that the relationship's going. Or they may serve papers and surprise the other person while they're already worried about how that person may respond to getting divorced. And that sort of stuff is just throwing gas on the flame. And so as a divorce coach, there's an opportunity there to get involved and do some work that they may not necessarily do just talking with an attorney or with a financial professional, really focusing on like the relational component of divorce.
Yeah. And that's really important because when you realize that you're going to have a relationship with this person that you're divorcing, possibly for the rest of your life because you still have children together, it changes the dynamics, if you will. I do see this with clients that come in the office and they're like, well, I am done with this person. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, okay, I hear you. You probably won't have to share a bed forever, but you may have to share time together. And you're definitely going to be sharing time together throughout the divorce process because guess what? We have to divide things.
Right.
And the other half of this division is the other spouse.
Right.
So whether you want to speak to them or not, we are going to have some type of communication going back and forth. So there is that relationship, even if it's a relationship to uncouple or divide things. And then when you have children, I've heard this too, where it's like, well, I'll be done with them when the kid turns 18. And I'm like, yeah, that is also not based in reality.
That's part of what my own experience has actually been.
Yeah.
Right. With my parents, they divorced when I was 16 and they've just moved in different directions.
Yeah.
And that's been hard too, especially as my children and their grandchildren have now come on the scene and they find that they don't have a relationship to stand on around special events and holidays and birthdays and vacations. It continues to rear its head.
Yeah.
So,
and it's not that you have to even be friends after the divorce occurs. It's, can you make the situation okay enough so that your children and your grandchildren both want to invite both of you to their wedding?
Yeah.
Or their graduation.
Right. Otherwise, the sense of family is literally broken.
Yeah.
Right. If those two individuals have walked in completely different directions, and that's kind of the end result or the experience for the children.
Yeah.
Yeah. So reminding people of that early on, again, can be very helpful in reminding them where they do have shared interests and starting from that, because people will oftentimes jump into where they've got differing interests and focus on that so much rather than starting with where they are aligned, whether it is conserving funds through this process, being able to provide for their kids, being able to show up for their kids. That can really bring them together and like lower the temperature a little bit. And
if we are in a more amicable environment, that breeds the opportunity for creativity. And so this'll, and I'm sure if the listener has listened to any of our other episodes, they will hear again, we can be so much more creative outside of a courtroom than we can inside of a courtroom.
Right.
That's the simple reality. And especially if your children have certain unique needs, or especially if you have a business or property ownership structures that are unique and you want to maintain them. I mean, I've had clients that, hey, we have this trust, but we want to keep it in joint names. By the way, a judge can't order that. A judge can't order that a certain item of property remain in joint names. They're required to distribute it.
Right.
Because once we file a claim for equitable distribution, that's what you're asking the court to do. And so it has to go to someone, right? And so if you want to keep something or you want to get creative, you have to do it outside of a courtroom. And that goes back to the relationship factors that you are involved in when you're going through the divorce.
Right. And I like to remind people that the moment that communication breaks down and they stop talking to one another, everything gets more complicated and more costly. So oftentimes there's an opportunity as a coach to look at, why is it so difficult to keep communicating with this person? And oftentimes people are responding to their spouse the same way that they did in the relationship, which didn't work, right? There was unresolved conflict in the relationship. Yeah. So sometimes it's coaching around new ways of responding to their spouse or new ways of communicating to their spouse that will allow for communication, even if it doesn't allow for like connection and closeness. It still allows for them to talk and discuss the details of what it is that they're going through. And for the reasons that you just shared, they're going to be able to have the opportunity for better outcomes if they're still talking.
Yeah, that's a good delineation as well. Is it's one thing to try to work on a marriage and maintain a marital relationship. But if that doesn't work out, okay, there are ways that we can end that chapter, but that doesn't remove the other forms of relationships that can exist. That could be forced upon you, right? Because if you're co-parents, guess what? You're co-parents by biology.
Right.
Biology dictated that, not the law, not anyone else, but biology. Separate from that is the reality of life. Like, do you want to go to the child's soccer game and be able to say hi to the other parent? You don't have to be besties, but do you want to at least be cordial? If you have extra chicken fingers, do you want to be able to be like, hey, I have extra chicken fingers. Do you want my remaining chicken fingers?
Right.
Not that you have to sit down and talk about everything that you should talk about during the marital relationship, but are you cordial enough? And I've had cases where parents become cordial enough where they do family photos every year because it's not about their relationship because they don't have a marital relationship anymore, but it's about the kid. And now the kid has a family photo of every year that they grew up for the rest of their lives.
Right.
And maybe they even pass that down to their grandchildren, right? Or another example is where, the dynamics can extend to beyond just a family photo and literally have family celebrations together, inclusive of any new partners or spouses. And suddenly you have, children's birthday parties or grandchildren's birthday parties, and you have everyone and their second spouse and their third relationship or whatever it may be. And suddenly you have a family event where it's just so much more love being passed, even if you're not besties with your ex, so that the rest of the family can benefit.
I experienced that with one of my best friends growing up, is his parents had divorced early on in his life, but they were so amicable that for Valentine's and for Easter and for these other holidays, they would all get together and it was good energy. And I remember having thoughts like, he's actually got 4 awesome parents to show up and support him now, rather than just 2.
Yeah.
And so, that was an experience, I think, of what you're describing here, which is it can actually feel really good.
Yeah.
And it can be functional, especially for the kids and what they're experiencing in terms of support of people around them.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we wonder, it's like, why do people not think about the kids?
Yeah.
Like, why aren't they thinking about this is a question that gets asked a lot. And a lot of it has to do with fear.
Yeah.
Moving through this process in a state of fear, our brains, the way that they work changes. Everything shrinks into right here, right now, and what I need to feel safe and certain right here, right now. And unfortunately, kids are oftentimes outside of what they're thinking about. And so to the degree that we can bring fear and uncertainty down as people are moving through this process, they'll be able to think about other people, they'll be able to think longer term, and ultimately, again, make better decisions in the long-term interests of their family rather than just trying to get back to shore so they don't feel like they're drowning.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that a lot of people unfortunately don't experience through divorce is they go through the whole thing kicking and screaming and scared and uncertain.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate for many reasons. Yeah. That being one of them.
Yeah. And having to act from a place of fear at all, because we've all been there, right? Is our least favored position, but also least beneficial for our own well-being. It's one thing if we're being chased by a lion. I get it. You got to run or you got to hide, right? But I have a strong suspicion that many of us are not running from lions on a day-to-day basis, even though our bodies are neurologically responding in that way to a lot of stressors, such as these questions that come up with separation and divorce, or possibly not seeing their children, or possibly, and the list goes on, because I've had clients come to my office and they spiral. They're like, oh, well, I might lose my job. And I'm like, wait a second, why are you going to lose your job because you might separate in 3 months? Are you employed by your soon-to-be ex? I don't understand.
Right.
But that fear creates all the what-ifs. I call it the black hole, where we could what if every single thought to death, if you will, into a black hole and never actually move the needle in productivity.
Right.
So how can we actually move the needle toward progress, toward resolution, whether that means staying together or separating and divorcing and moving on to that next chapter?
Yeah. Again, for me, it goes back to hearing these concerns and fears and finding a way to turn them into questions that can then be answered.
I love that tactic, how you say that, because I've seen that too, where I'm questioning what my client is asking.
Right.
And I sometimes will be like, well, I honestly don't know, because I'm not a mental health professional. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a legislator, because a lot of people ask us to change the law.
Okay.
We can't change the law. A little plug there. And so I try to guide them into asking the right questions. But to your point, if they're with you saying, I have all of these concerns and fears, it comes from a more, I would say, valid place, if you will, to then delineate which questions are the actual questions that will bring them comfort and reduce their fear.
And sometimes they can't even really ask these questions. It's just listening to what their concerns are that comes up in all of the stuff that gets thrown out on the desk over 30 minutes of listening to someone spiral. And you're like, well, these are clearly the things that are concerning you. And then just double checking there and then starting to drill in on those.
Yeah.
Lots of concerns from men around like alimony and spousal support. I don't know if I can get a divorce. She said she's going to take me for all I've got, right? I may have to pay alimony for the rest of her life. I don't know. And that fear will stop them from even investigating divorce and potentially moving themselves into a healthier situation, even though they haven't checked any of those assumptions with like a legal professional to go in and say, how is alimony typically handled? If this was our situation and it kind of looks like this, what might I expect? That's really powerful in terms of helping that individual to go, well, crap, what she says is actually likely what's going to happen.
Or
and then
possibly not.
Or not. But but then at least you can make an informed decision around that.
Yeah.
And people have similar questions about the house and about the kids. And can I get more than 50-50 custody?
Yeah.
Or someone says, I'm not going to let you have the kids. So a lot of those threats really hit people deeply and it stops them from moving forward. And they never really think, how can I get clarification on this point?
Yeah.
And so just helping them to distill that down, have them literally write it down on a piece of paper and then say, you really need to talk to an attorney. Like, just get an hour of paid consultation, go in and start asking these questions. Suddenly new doorways open and they're able to start to move forward with less fear.
Yeah. And not only they're able to move forward by setting up that consultation and getting those specific questions answered, but they're also ready to receive the information.
Correct.
I think that tends to be one of our biggest hurdles as attorneys is we will sometimes say things till we're literally blue in the face. Like you can do that, or you cannot do that, or that's not what would happen. This is what would happen. And I sometimes feel bad because I'm like, my client is paying me for this, but they don't seem to be hearing me. And I want them to hear me for a multitude of reasons, not only because they're paying me, but because I've said it 10 times and because the longer and more effort I'm putting into like making my client hear me is having the reverse effect, right? And suddenly my client is like, well, why are you getting mad at me? I'm like, well, I'm not getting mad at you. It's just, I've said it 10 times. And so to be primed to actually receive the information and legal advice is critical to then actually move forward.
Right. And people oftentimes don't even know like the order of operations in which things may unfold. So they're thinking about everything all at once. And even small things like explaining that there's going to be a discussion around assets and liabilities and a conversation around custody and parenting and a conversation around spousal support and a conversation around child support. And to kind of just break these things apart into buckets and say, well, we can just focus on this one for the purpose of this conversation. What are your concerns over here? Helps them to just get a little bit more organized around what it is, where they want to start. Where do I want to start getting information? Where is my biggest fear, even between those 4 buckets? And just creating these little shadows of structure can start to ground them and center them so they understand kind of where they're at and where they're going and what they need to move forward.
Yeah.
But it's a lot, when someone's coming in and everything's on the table. It's really hard if you don't have someone to help break it down and organize it and then move you one step forward, one step forward, one step forward.
Yeah. Especially when it's been a complicated situation, maybe a lengthy marriage, maybe a lot of property and debts, maybe a number of children with different needs at that. And I think it's important to remind anyone who's listening to this right now that there are resources out there. Even if you've gone to one consultation with an attorney and you're like, I don't feel like I got anything from it. Maybe it's because, to your earlier point, maybe it's because you're talking to the wrong person. Maybe you need to talk to a divorce coach first. And then you will feel like your questions are actually being answered. Those well-defined questions are actually being answered when you schedule a consultation again with an attorney thereafter.
Yep. And additional resources you don't even know are available. Like many people are divorcing a difficult personality. They'll label it a number of ways, right? And many people don't think of going to a therapist, not for their own healing, but to better understand this personality, how to communicate and interact with the other person more skillfully as they go through the divorce process. That was kind of a new aha for me that, oh, wow, therapists can do skill building for working with difficult personalities.
Yep.
Most people don't know that that's a resource. They don't think to do that, but that may be a couple of $100s that are well worth the effort for navigating ongoing communications, whether it's around parenting or negotiations.
Yeah.
Right? There are insurance brokers that can help you to think through who's going to carry insurance for the kids.
Yep.
What are the available options?
Yep.
That sometimes gets missed.
That, as well as dealing with mortgages.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it time and time again where I'll have clients that go out and apply for mortgages, and maybe they are receiving spousal support, or maybe their income situation has just changed significantly, and now they don't have a cosigner like their spouse on a certain loan document. And I'll say, well, who did you go to? And they'll name, especially here in Charlotte, they'll name certain banks. I'm like, well, obviously we're denied. 90% of people are denied, and they're not even dealing with a divorce. You have to go to the right mortgage professional. And we have certified divorce lending professionals in town.
Right.
We have a certified divorce financial analyst. We have divorce coaches. We have so many resources out there. And I think it is critical that our clients know that we can be the start of them being connected to all those resources, so that they are, in fact, actually saving money. But more importantly, they're saving on emotional distress and on fears keeping them back.
Right.
So, James, we could talk all day about this. I feel like we will probably talk again very soon about all of this. But before I let you go, as we're wrapping up, where could a listener learn more about you and what you do?
For sure. So my website is bestpossibledivorce.com. And that's where they can get connected with me. If they're interested in setting up a free consultation, they can do that there. They can find me on LinkedIn, follow some of my content there as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you, James, for being here in the Legal Lounge.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our discussion. To learn more about me and the Modern Legal team, go to our website, modernlegalnc.com, or check out the links in our show notes to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can also call us at 704-286-6302. If you have been intrigued by the conversation and would like us to continue our discussions, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. See you next time.